lot of the cities are really the ones that are getting most involved first.
Right.
Here in Toronto, the City of Toronto is quite active on open data. They released their open data portal to allow for the release of data from inside government to the community at large a year ago, and they've been building on that over the past year. They've got a number of employees, staff that have come here to see if there's something that the city can do to help, which is great.
Yeah.
And so, the City of Toronto is definitely one that, as we would say, gets it.
Yeah.
And sees the value in engaging these kinds of creative communities to do problem solving in new ways. It's kind of like the antithesis of WikiLeaks, right? Yeah, WikiLeaks is, people see it as this really big disruption. It's very controversial. But my message is around these same technologies that enable people to collaborate across borders and across organizational boundaries is part of the value of releasing information, having information and the things that you create shareable and remixable. So that's the real message coming out of a lot of these events, is that we can do more together than apart, and that the problems that we have to solve are so big that no one entity, even a government, can't actually solve them on their own. And we have to learn this new way of working, right? So hackathons are actually just laboratories for new ways of working.
Right.
That's the way I look at it. Because out of these little labs, new behaviors are starting to get established, new norms of how we get along, and eventually those start to go into those organizations like the City of Toronto, and they're trying to wrap their heads around it, and they'll start to change and adapt to this new network way of working. It's, for most, the biggest barrier really is inside governments specifically. There's a fear of losing control and of controlling the message, the meaning of the data, right? And they see that that's their role, is to help create meaning around information. And so that's the biggest barriers, is there are people inside government that have access to just tons of really valuable information that could create so much more value out in the world, but they see in their own interests to hold on to it because information is power. And so when those people start to realize that they actually get more power, more influence by releasing that information and working with communities than by hanging on to it, then that will turn. But this is very early in that process of learning.
Right.
I think the one that's probably most likely to come to some fruition on the open data side is around finding stolen bicycles.
Very important in Toronto.
Very important in Toronto. And so I expect by Sunday, tomorrow, we'll have a good idea of how that's going to be solved.
Right.
And it already has the interest of Toronto Police Services, so they're already aware that this is happening and willing to work with that group. But the concept is that a lot of people, some people, register their bicycle with the city to say, this is my bicycle, this is the serial number. But the vast majority of bikes stolen never get checked against that database. And so, stolen bicycles don't get recovered, they get sold in bike shops across the city as used bikes. And nobody knows that the used bike I'm buying is actually a stolen bike. So the idea is that if you had on your mobile device a very simple thing that says, oh, here's the serial number, I'm going to punch it in and check it before I buy to make sure that this is actually not a stolen bike. And so it's just a very simple thing that, on an iPhone or an Android phone or BlackBerry, I could quickly check that before I hand over my money. And what would be very interesting is to see how many bikes in bike shops are actually stolen.